Hello friends. In this video, I want to talk about one of the most confusing things about being in a narcissistic relationship. If you are in one, you are experiencing this and it's probably driving you crazy. So I want to talk about this to help you gain some clarity and some insight from a different perspective that may really help you understand what you're going through and where you are. Okay, so first off, narcissistic people aren't all bad all the time. As you know, probably started off really lovely. This person was so sweet and generous and kind and made you feel really amazing. And they probably still do at times. It would be a lot easier if that person was just a complete jerk all of the time. Then you would be pretty clear that you'd want to leave. But that's not the case. Narcissistic people tend to have a Jekyll-Hyde thing going on. So there's two very strong sides of the personality. On one side, you can get this very charming, very in tune, very seemingly caring and thoughtful version of this person that, sweeps you off your feet or can seem to just understand you and get you. On the other side, you have a version of this person that is likely a pathological liar. They might be cheating on you. They probably get really volatile and intense with you if you try to talk to them about anything meaningful or their impact. They might go into rage fits. They might just be really mean. And it's like that. You're dealing with a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde experience, and that is incredibly confusing. To top it off, that person is probably not showing that side, the nasty side of themselves to your friends and your mutual people that you know. They tend to only really dish that out to one person behind closed doors. It's usually their spouse, or maybe, a coworker, a best friend, someone they're really close to and in a more intimate container with. So that means you're the only person getting to experience this side of them. And so when you watch how they behave very kindly to other people when they're being really mean to you behind closed doors, it can cause a lot of internal confusion and frustration. And you're probably going to think that you're nuts, because that person has probably told you that you're nuts when you call them out on their really hideous behavior. So after this initial phase of them being super lovely, the love bombing phase, the mask starts to slip a little bit, usually slowly at first. And, they tend to be more minor infractions. And, as a compassionate and empathic person, you know that we all make mistakes. We're all human. None of us is 100% all the time. We all struggle. So what happens is that you give this person the benefit of the doubt. However, you'll likely start to see it happen more and more and more, and the severity of it increases over time. By the time you are in the devaluation stage, things get pretty severe. They start saying some really cruel things that you couldn't have imagined possible. By that time, you are probably really deep in the relationship, and it's a lot harder to extract yourself. Also, the investment of time and love and energy that you've put into it makes it harder to leave. That's just simple, like sunk cost fallacy. As human beings, we don't like to let go of something that we have invested a lot into, so that makes it a whole lot harder. Usually, the biggest changes happen after a commitment deepens. Especially with a romantic partner. Maybe things were going really well and really sweetly until you moved in together or you got married, and then shortly thereafter you get a full 180 flip. I've heard about this happening all the time, experienced it myself, and it is very disorienting. This happens because that narcissistic person understands that you're all in and you're not really going anywhere anytime soon. So it's a lot easier for that mask to slip, for them to relax into who they truly are at their core, which isn't what they were holding up for you in the beginning of the relationship. In the beginning of these relationships, a narcissist will hold a really beautifully crafted mask. It's very charming, it's very charismatic, and as I said, it can seem very loving and wonderful to be around. But it is a narcissistic persona. These people are hurting tremendously on the inside and are full of shame, and that mask helps them to deal with it. So they don't really relate to you from their vulnerable self at first. And that's why later on in the relationship, if you were to speak of anything vulnerable or tender, that's why they will freak out on you, because that bypasses this safety. It's a safety mechanism, this narcissistic construct, this mask, and it takes a lot of energy for them to uphold it. This is usually why people who are in an intimate relationship with this person are the only people who get to see it, and all of your other friends who aren't living with them, building a life together, trying to do deeper things or needing to discuss, more intimate details of life, which, is normal, which is what happens, is what is healthy in intimate relationships. They're not going to see any of that because usually those outside relationships don't require a level of intimacy and vulnerability as an intimate or romantic partnership does. And even after the narcissist's mask starts to slip and you start to get more and more of these really intense, not so pretty behaviors from them, they can still be nice from time to time. So what starts happening is that you get these really unpleasant experiences from them, like the abuse starts to ramp up. And then you can also get these really sweet experiences from them. So you're starting to get this intermittent reinforcement thing going on. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. It's really important. But this does two things. So the first thing that it does is that it confirms that the person that you fell in love with is still there. They still exist. So sometimes when a person starts treating us badly, we start to think, oh, well, that's just not okay. This isn't the person who I fell in love with. And then we start to move away from that, or, start to devise an exit plan or realize that this isn't good for us. Usually when we get to that state, that other person will put their mask back up because they know that if they don't do that, we're out of there. And so they realize their mask is slipping. They need to put it back on in order to keep us around. So when that happens, we think, oh, okay, this person is here. And it's hard because internally, the process that we're going through is that we are hoping that the version of them that we fell in love with would come back, right? Like we love them and we miss them when they have turned into this other persona. We do want them back. And when they do come back around and show us their masked version of themselves again, there is a sense of relief and reconciliation and hope that everything's going to be okay. The other thing that this back and forth dynamic does is that it also gives us a lot of contrast. Like when that version of them comes forward again, we get to see the part of them that we love, but then we can also see wow, this is not what has been happening for the past little bit. So ultimately, you are dealing with two versions of the same person. You're actually dealing with two different personalities. So there's the charming narcissistic construct, and then there is the very vulnerable, shame-filled, authentic person that is very wounded and in need of healing, but is also very cruel. It is a Jekyll and Hyde scenario. So when you're going back and forth like this, it starts to create the intermittent reinforcement pattern. So intermittent reinforcement is incredibly confusing to your brain and your nervous system and even your body chemistry. It's something I've spoken about before and will continue to talk about because it drives a lot of our behavior in relationships, especially our toxic behavior and our attraction to toxic relationships. So once we understand this, it's a lot easier for us to step away from dynamics that are harmful for us. And it'll also help us recognize them from the beginning so we don't get too enmeshed in something that's toxic. And the intermittent reinforcement pattern is one of the biggest reasons that people stay in relationships with abusive people. So when you're dealing with intermittent reinforcement, you don't really know what to expect at any given moment. So dopamine, we get it when we get a reward for something, but we don't release dopamine when the reward is given. We release it in anticipation of that reward. Intermittent reinforcement is also coined as the slot machine effect. So you've seen people on slot machines. It's just so addictive, and there is a science to it. They've done studies on many different animals where they have a little contraption where a button's either pressed or pecked, and then a treat is delivered. If the treat is delivered 100% of the time, the animal will go and press the lever and receive the treat and then go about its life and not think about it again until he wants another treat. If the treat is never delivered, then the animal just loses interest pretty quickly altogether. Now, if this treat is dispensed about 50% of the time, they said that the highest ratio is between 30 to 70% of the time a treat is dispensed, the animal will become obsessed with the dispenser. So think about that. Like anytime you have anyone in your life that is withholding affection, or sometimes gives it, sometimes withdraws it, sometimes gives it, sometimes withdraws it, like your brain starts to get hooked and obsessed, and you can't quite figure out like what it is that makes the person give you love, or what it is that makes the person withdraw love. Like your brain starts to take it on as a logical problem, and you begin to obsess about it. And a lot of times we mistake that kind of obsession and thinking about all the time as love or a deep connection, because we'll feel it. We'll feel this pull towards in our body, and we mistake that as love and a good connection, when actually what that is a dopamine chemical response going off in our body. We're getting cortisol, we're getting dopamine, and it goes back and forth, and we're getting pulled around, and it's highly enticing. It's not love. This is the definition of a trauma bond. So that in itself is very confusing, because what it feels like in your body is a connection, and you're drawn towards this person. Like you are drawn towards figuring out how to make them happy. And then the way it affects your body chemistry, you feel so much for this person, and they kind of consume your reality because you're confused. So it makes you pull towards them, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to do. And to make matters more confusing is that your friends don't see this at all. Like they will see your confusion probably, but to them, you probably look like you're nuts and crazy and problematic, because you're starting to become unhinged a little bit, because it's a very maddening thing to experience. Your friends probably only get, the cool, calm, collected, charismatic, charming version of the narcissistic person in your life. So they don't get it. And if you try to talk to them about it, again, you'll look crazy and become even more confused. And that can make a person feel very alone and even at fault in the abuse. Oftentimes, people in this situation start thinking, well, if I can change them, if I can be good enough, if I can figure out the right thing to say or do to make this person happy and love me again, or figure out the things that I'm doing or saying that are making this person be mean, then I'll get the loving version of them again, right? And the thing is that it doesn't really have anything to do with you. Like oftentimes you'll find that these people have a reputation of treating others the same exact way. And maybe somebody even told you that in the beginning, but you didn't believe it because you saw this beautiful, charming, sweet version of them, right? It seemed preposterous that they could behave that way when you're getting a completely different experience. So then when you are going through the abuse cycle with them, your friends feel the exact same way, and you're stuck on the other side of the curtain, and No one else is there with you. So if you are stuck behind the curtain with someone who's treating you this way, please do yourself a favor and research NPD, find support, find a therapist who specializes in narcissistic abuse recovery. And if you're not quite there yet, just pay attention. I know that it takes a lot of time and even so much courage to even admit that this is what is going on. Like, it's the last thing that we want to believe, because it would mean changing a lot in our lives, and it's really overwhelming and it's really scary. Also, if you see a friend who is going through something like this and they're talking about something like this, pay attention. You know, it might not be a good time to say, hey, you are with a narcissist. But that usually does not go well. They're not going to want to believe you. They're probably not ready for that. But do say, I am here for you if you ever need to talk about it. I'm here for you whenever you need. Like, I'm seeing things, I feel a little bit concerned. Let me know if you're ever there. I mean, you might not even want to express your concern, because that can cause a whole big blow up, but just let them know that you're present, okay? This dynamic is especially challenging for people who struggle with codependency, who are empaths, who are extremely compassionate and want to understand and give other people the benefit of the doubt. We want to do that for other people, especially our loved ones, that we can see are suffering. And these people are suffering. Like, always, this anger and abuse comes out of a place of suffering. But I'm going to tell you that all of the compassion and love in the world won't help that other person out. Like, they have to do it themselves. You need to turn your compassion and your empathy towards yourself. I hope this video helped to clarify some of the most confusing aspects about being in a narcissistic relationship. If you have a comment to share, please drop it below, and I will see you in the next one.